The stars had always called to humanity. For 200 years, they had answered that call, spreading across 12 star systems and building colonies on worlds their ancestors could only dream about. They were proud of what they had built. They were proud of how far they had come. But in the vast darkness of space, they were still very small. Admiral Grace Holloway stood on the bridge of the carrier Defiant, watching the scanner display with tired eyes. She had been in command for 15 years, and she had seen many strange things in the void between stars. But nothing had prepared her for what appeared on her screen that morning. The alien ship came out of hyperspace like a mountain being born. It was massive, easily 3 times larger than anything humanity had ever constructed. Its hull was black as coal and covered in strange patterns that glowed with pale blue light. The patterns moved and shifted like living things, and Grace felt a chill run down her spine as she watched them. "Admiral," said Danny Price, her communications officer. He was a young man with red hair and nervous hands. "We're receiving a transmission." Grace nodded slowly. "Put it through." The bridge speakers crackled, and then a voice filled the room. It was deep and cold, translated by computer systems into flat, emotionless English. "Attention, human vessels. I am High Prelate Zorath Ka, Supreme Commander of the Valthrin Dominion Expansion Fleet. You will listen carefully to my words." Grace said nothing. Her tactical officer, Maria Santos, was already running calculations on her console, her dark eyes moving rapidly across the data. The alien voice continued. "The Valthrin Dominion has watched your species expand across this region of space. You have done so without permission. You have claimed worlds that do not belong to you. This is not acceptable." Danny looked at Grace with wide eyes. She held up a hand, telling him to stay quiet. "You have 30 standard days to comply with the following demands," Zorath Ka said. "First, you will dismantle all military vessels and weapons. Second, you will surrender control of all your colonies to Dominion administrators. Third, you will accept your place as a servitor species within the Dominion hierarchy. You will serve us in whatever capacity we require." Maria made a small sound of disbelief. Grace's expression did not change. "If you comply, your species will be allowed to continue existing under our protection. If you refuse, you will be destroyed. Every colony will burn. Every ship will be broken apart. Your homeworld will be reduced to ash, and your species will be erased from the memory of the galaxy. You have 30 days. Choose wisely." The transmission ended. Silence filled the bridge. Danny was the first to speak. "Admiral, they can't be serious. They can't just—" "They're serious," Grace said quietly. She turned to look at the massive alien ship still hovering on her display. "Get me a secure line to Earth Command. Wake up everyone who matters. We have work to do." On Earth, the news spread quickly through the halls of power. President Nathan Cole was pulled from his bed at 3 in the morning and brought to the Situation Room beneath the White House. He was a tall man with gray hair and a face that had seen too many crises. But even he looked shaken as he read the translated demands. "How many ships do they have?" he asked. General Patricia Webb, head of Earth's military forces, pulled up the intelligence reports. "Our long-range sensors detected at least 200 vessels in their main fleet. The big one, the flagship, is larger than anything we've ever seen. We estimate it carries enough firepower to destroy a continent." "And our forces?" 47 combat-ready ships in the outer colonies. Another 60 in various stages of readiness closer to Earth. We're outnumbered and outgunned." Cole sat back in his chair and closed his eyes. Around him, advisors and military leaders argued about options. Some wanted to fight. Others wanted to negotiate. A few, their voices quiet with fear, suggested that perhaps submission was the only way to survive. The president listened to all of them. Then he stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was rising over Washington, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere out there, millions of people were waking up to start their day, unaware that their entire existence had just been threatened. "What do we know about these Vilethrin?" he asked. General Webb pulled up another file. "Not much, sir. Our deep space probes detected signs of their civilization about 50 years ago, but we never made direct contact. From what we can gather, they've been expanding across the galaxy for at least 1,000 years. They've conquered at least 17 other species. Did any of those species fight back?" Webb hesitated. "Records suggest that some tried. None succeeded." Cole nodded slowly. He thought about his children, about his grandchildren, about all the generations of humans who had worked so hard to reach the stars. He thought about what it would mean to kneel before these aliens, to become their servants, their slaves. "No," he said finally. The room went quiet. "Sir?" Webb asked. "I said no." Cole turned to face the assembled leaders. "We will not submit. We will not kneel. We will not hand over our children to become slaves for some alien empire." "Mr. President," one of the advisors said carefully, "if we refuse, they'll attack. You heard their message. They'll destroy everything." "Maybe they will," Cole agreed. "Maybe we'll lose. But I will not be the man who sold humanity's future because I was afraid to fight for it." He looked at General Webb. "What do we have? What can we do?" Webb straightened up. There was a new light in her eyes, something that looked almost like hope. "There's something we've been working on, sir. A project we started 10 years ago after our probes first detected signs of hostile alien activity. It's called Project Prometheus." "Tell me about it." 300 ships, sir. Built in secret in the asteroid belt. Equipped with weapon systems unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen. We didn't know if we'd ever need them, but we built them anyway, just in case. Cole felt something loosen in his chest. It wasn't relief. They were still facing impossible odds, but it was something. A chance, a hope. "Get them ready," he said. "Get everything ready. If these aliens want a war, we'll give them one they'll never forget." And so humanity began to prepare, not for surrender, not for submission, but for the fight of their lives. The Vilethrin had demanded that humans bow down. They had demanded obedience, servitude, and fear. They had no idea what they had started. 28 days had passed since the ultimatum. High Prelate Zorath Ka stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, watching the data streams with growing satisfaction. Everything was proceeding exactly as expected. The humans were behaving like every other species the Dominion had conquered. Their diplomatic channels showed desperate attempts to negotiate better terms of surrender. Refugee ships fled from the border colonies toward their core worlds. Military vessels pulled back from defensive positions, retreating in obvious fear. Zorath Ka had seen this pattern many times before. First came defiance, then fear, then acceptance. The humans had simply moved through the stages faster than most. In 2 more days, they would kneel before him and beg for mercy. He would grant it, of course. Broken species made useful servants. He turned to his second-in-command, Fleet Marshal Thren Vok. "Status of the invasion fleet?" "All vessels are in position, High Prelate. We await only your command to begin the subjugation." "Excellent. These humans have proven to be refreshingly reasonable. I had expected more resistance from a species that expanded so aggressively." Thren Vok made a sound of agreement. Neither of them noticed the small discrepancy in the sensor data. The fact that some of those retreating human ships had disappeared from tracking entirely, as if they had simply ceased to exist. Far away in the asteroid belt of the Sol system, those ships had not ceased to exist. They had simply gone somewhere no one was looking. Commander Jack Reeves stood in the massive underground hangar carved into the largest asteroid in the belt. Around him, 300 warships waited in perfect rows, their hulls gleaming under harsh artificial lights. These were not the sleek exploration vessels humanity showed to the galaxy. These were weapons of war, built with a single purpose in mind. "Final status report," Jack said to his chief engineer, a stocky woman named Carol Hayes. "All ships are combat ready, sir. Weapon systems charged, engines at full capacity. The crews have been drilling for this moment for years. They're ready." Jack nodded and looked at the nearest ship, a heavy cruiser named Firestorm. It was beautiful in a deadly way, all sharp angles and hidden gun ports. The engineers had designed it to kill, and it looked the part. A door opened behind him, and Dr. Linda Park walked in. She was a small woman with gray streaks in her black hair and eyes that always seemed to be calculating something. She was also the most brilliant weapons designer humanity had ever produced. "The Helios missiles are loaded and ready," she said without greeting. "I ran final diagnostics this morning. They'll work." "You're certain?" Linda almost smiled. "I'm certain they'll work. What I'm not certain about is whether the aliens will understand what hit them. Nothing like this has ever been used in galactic warfare. The other species rely on plasma weapons, kinetic rounds, conventional explosives. They've never seen what a weaponized solar flare can do." Jack thought about the science behind her creation. The Helios missiles didn't destroy targets directly. Instead, they destabilized a star's corona, causing it to release massive bursts of radiation and plasma. Any ship caught in the blast zone would be cooked from the inside out. It was brutal, terrifying, and completely unexpected. "Let's hope we never have to use them," he said. Linda's expression hardened. "We'll have to use them. That's why we built them." On Earth, President Cole addressed the United Nations in a secret session. The world's leaders had gathered, their faces pale with worry. They had all seen the intelligence reports. They all knew what was coming. "In 2 days," Cole said, "the Valthrin fleet will begin its invasion. They expect us to surrender. They expect us to submit without a fight." He paused, looking around the room. "They are wrong." He explained Project Prometheus, the hidden fleet, the Helios weapons. He explained the strategy that Admiral Holloway had developed, a plan to draw the enemy deep into human space, to make them overconfident, and then to strike when they least expected it. "This will not be easy," Cole admitted. "We will lose colonies. We will lose ships. We will lose people. Many of us in this room may not live to see the end of this war." He straightened his shoulders. "But humanity will survive. Humanity will fight. And if we do this right, humanity will win." The vote was unanimous. Every nation on Earth committed their resources to the war effort. Factories that had been building civilian goods switched to military production. Scientists abandoned their research projects to work on weapons and defenses. Ordinary citizens volunteered for military service in numbers that overwhelmed the recruitment centers. Humanity had made its choice. On the colony worlds, preparations of a different kind were underway. Colonel Sam Torres flew from planet to planet, coordinating the resistance networks that would activate when the Valthrin invaded. On Kepler 442b, he met with local militia leaders in a basement beneath the capital city. "They'll come with overwhelming force," he told them. "They'll expect you to run or hide. Don't. Fight them in the streets. Fight them in the buildings. Fight them in the sewers. Make them pay for every inch of ground." A young woman named Beth Carter raised her hand. She was barely 20 years old, with blonde hair and a determined expression. "Sir, what if we can't win? What if they're just too strong?" Sam looked at her for a long moment. "Then you make sure they remember you. You make sure they know that humans don't go quietly. You make sure that every soldier they send against us goes home with nightmares." He leaned forward. "We may not win every battle, but we will make them afraid to fight the next one." On day 29, Admiral Grace Holloway broadcast humanity's official response to the Valthrin ultimatum. She stood on the bridge of the Defiant, wearing her dress uniform, her silver hair pulled back in a tight braid. Behind her, her crew stood at attention. "To the Velthrin Dominion and High Prelate Zorath Ka," she said, her voice calm and clear. "We have received your demands. We have considered them carefully, and we have reached a decision." She paused, letting the silence stretch across the void. "We decline." The transmission ended. Within minutes, Velthrin sensors detected massive power signatures across human space as defense systems came online. Ships that had been hiding in asteroid fields and behind gas giants emerged into open space. And from the Sol system, 300 new contacts appeared on galactic sensors for the first time. On the Eternal Conquest, High Prelate Zorath Ka stared at his displays in confusion. The numbers didn't make sense. The humans were supposed to have fewer than 100 combat-ready ships. Where had these new vessels come from? "High Prelate," Threnvok said urgently, "our projections were wrong. The humans have been deceiving us." Zorath Ka felt something cold settle in his chest. It was an unfamiliar sensation. After a moment, he recognized it as uncertainty. "No matter," he said, forcing confidence into his voice. "We still outnumber them. We still have superior technology. Begin the invasion." The Velthrin fleet moved forward, engines burning bright against the darkness of space. The war had begun. The first battle of the war happened at Kepler 442b, humanity's outermost colony. It was a green world with 2 small moons, home to nearly 3 million people who had built their lives far from Earth. Now those people huddled in shelters beneath their cities, listening to the distant thunder of ships entering atmosphere. The Velthrin expected an easy victory. Their advance fleet consisted of 30 vessels, more than enough to crush the small human defense force and establish a foothold for the main invasion. They entered the system in perfect formation, weapons charged, sensors sweeping for targets. They found Captain Diego Vance waiting for them. Diego was 42 years old, with dark skin and a scar across his left cheek from a training accident years ago. He commanded the destroyer Horizon, a fast ship with a crew of 200. He had spent his entire career preparing for a fight like this one, and now it was finally here. "All ships, maintain position in the asteroid ring," he ordered through the fleet channel. "Wait for my signal." Around him, 47 human vessels hid among the spinning rocks and dust of the planet's outer ring. They had powered down their engines and were running on minimal systems, invisible to enemy sensors. It was dangerous. One wrong move could send them crashing into an asteroid. But Diego knew they needed every advantage they could get. The Velthrin fleet moved past the ring, heading toward the planet. They had scanned the asteroids and found nothing. Their confidence grew with every passing minute. Diego watched them on his passive sensors, counting the seconds. When the enemy fleet was directly between his ships and the planet, with nowhere to retreat, he gave the order. "All ships, attack!" The human fleet burst from the asteroid ring like a swarm of angry hornets. Their engines flared to life, and they accelerated toward the enemy at speeds that should have been impossible. The Velthrin had never seen anything move that fast. Diego's weapons officer, a young man named Chris Palmer, locked onto the nearest enemy cruiser. "Firing main guns!" The Horizon's kinetic cannons roared, sending tungsten rounds toward the target at a fraction of the speed of light. The Velthrin ship's shields flared bright purple as they tried to deflect the attack. For a moment, it seemed like they would hold. Then the shields collapsed, and the rounds tore through the alien hull like paper. The cruiser broke apart in a silent explosion, debris spinning off into the void. "Target destroyed," Chris reported, already locking onto the next ship. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human ships darted between the larger Velthrin vessels, firing from unexpected angles, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. The alien plasma weapons were powerful, but they were designed for slower, more predictable opponents. They couldn't track the human ships. The Valthrin commander sent a frantic message back to the main fleet. "We are under heavy attack. Enemy forces are more numerous and more capable than expected. Request immediate reinforcements." High Prelate Zorath Ka, still hundreds of light years away, received the message with growing anger. "Impossible," he said. 30 ships should be enough to crush any human resistance." But the casualty reports kept coming. One cruiser lost, then another, then a destroyer, then 3 frigates in rapid succession. On Kepler 442b's surface, the ground invasion had begun. Valthrin dropships fell from the sky like metal rain, landing in the outskirts of New Providence, the colony's largest city. Thousands of alien soldiers poured out, their weapons ready, their armored bodies gleaming in the afternoon sun. They expected terrified civilians running for their lives. They expected easy conquest. They found Lieutenant Kate Sawyer instead. Kate was 31 years old, with short brown hair and a rifle she had been carrying since she was 18. She had grown up on this world, in this city. Every street, every building, every sewer tunnel was burned into her memory, and she had spent the last month turning all of it into a death trap. "Hold fire until they reach the plaza," she told her squad through their helmet radios. "Let them think they've won." The Valthrin soldiers advanced through the empty streets, their sensors showing no threats. The buildings around them were dark and silent. Some of the aliens began to relax, lowering their weapons slightly. Then they reached the plaza, and the world exploded. Bombs buried beneath the pavement detonated, sending alien bodies flying through the air. Gunfire erupted from every window, every rooftop, every shadow. Human soldiers who had been hiding for hours suddenly appeared everywhere at once. Kate led a charge from a side alley, her squad pouring fire into the confused enemy formation. The Valthrin tried to regroup, tried to return fire, but they were surrounded. Their superior technology meant nothing when they couldn't see their targets. The fighting lasted for 6 brutal hours. Kate lost count of how many aliens she killed. She also lost count of how many friends she watched die. By the time the sun set, the plaza was covered in bodies, human and alien alike. But the Valthrin advance had been stopped. In orbit, Captain Vance was fighting his own desperate battle. The enemy reinforcements had arrived, and now the human fleet was outnumbered 3-1. Ships were dying on both sides, but the humans were taking heavier losses. "Reactor breach on Deck 7, his damage control officer reported. "We've lost 20% of our weapons capacity." Diego gripped his command chair as the ship shuddered from another hit. "Can we still fight?" "Yes, sir. But not for much longer." Diego looked at his tactical display. The Valthrin were pushing toward the planet, determined to establish a foothold, no matter the cost. If they succeeded, millions of civilians would be at their mercy. "All ships," he broadcast, "concentrate fire on the lead dreadnought. Everything we have." The human fleet turned as one, abandoning their evasive tactics to focus all their firepower on a single target. The Valthrin dreadnought's shields flickered under the assault, weakening with every hit. Chris Palmer's hands flew across his console. "Shields are failing. One more volley should do it. Fire!" The dreadnought exploded, its reactor going critical and taking 2 nearby cruisers with it. The Valthrin formation scattered in confusion, their command structure suddenly decapitated. But the victory came at a terrible price. Half of the human fleet was gone, destroyed or crippled beyond repair. The horizon itself was barely holding together, with fires burning on 3 decks and half the crew dead or wounded. Diego ordered the retreat. There was no shame in it. They had done everything they could. They had held the line longer than anyone had expected. As his damaged ship limped away from the battlefield, he looked back at Kepler 442b. The Valthrin would take the planet now. There was no stopping that, but they had paid dearly for it. The final casualty reports reached High Prelate Zorath Ka later that night. 18 Veilthrin warships destroyed. Over 40,000 soldiers dead on the ground. A battle that should have lasted hours had taken days, and the cost had been 100 times higher than projected. Zorath Ka stared at the numbers for a long time. In 1,000 years of conquest, the Dominion had never suffered losses like this against a single species. These humans were supposed to be primitives, easily crushed, quickly forgotten. For the first time in his long life, the High Prelate began to wonder if he had made a mistake. Far away, in the asteroid belt of Sol, Commander Jack Reeves received the battle reports with a grim expression. Kepler 442b had fallen, but it had not fallen easily. The plan was working. Now it was time for the next phase. 6 weeks into the war, the Veilthrin had conquered 7 human colonies. Each victory had cost them more than the last. Their soldiers had learned to fear the human defenders who seemed to appear from nowhere and vanish just as quickly. Their ship captains had learned to respect the small, fast human vessels that could outrun anything in the Dominion fleet. But still they advanced. High Prelate Zorath Ka was determined to crush this rebellion no matter the cost. His reputation depended on it. His life depended on it. Failure was not something the Dominion tolerated. Admiral Grace Holloway watched the enemy advance from the Bridge of the Defiant, now positioned in the Tau Ceti system. This was humanity's most important colony outside of Earth, home to nearly 50 million people. It was also the place where she planned to end the war. "Status of the evacuation?" she asked. Her executive officer, Commander Tony Blake, checked his console. 92% of civilians have been moved to the shelters. The rest should be underground within the hour. And the fleet? All ships are in position. The Prometheus force is holding on the far side of the system, behind the 4th planet. They're completely hidden from enemy sensors. Grace nodded slowly. Everything was in place. Now they just had to wait. The Veilthrin fleet arrived 3 days later. It was the largest force they had assembled since the war began. Over 200 ships, including Zorath Ka's flagship, the Eternal Conquest. The High Prelate had decided to lead this battle personally, determined to finally break human resistance. He stood on his command deck, watching the human fleet on his displays. They were outnumbered almost 4-1. This would be the decisive battle, the moment when humanity finally learned the price of defiance. "All ships, advance," he ordered. "Destroy everything." The Veilthrin fleet moved forward in a massive wave, their weapons charging, their shields at full power. The human ships fell back, firing as they retreated, trying to slow the enemy advance. Grace watched the tactical display with calm eyes. "Steady," she said to her crew. "Hold formation, make them chase us." The battle raged for hours. Human ships died, but so did Veilthrin vessels. The defenders fought with desperate courage, knowing that everything depended on drawing the enemy deeper into the system. Commander Jack Reeves sat in the command center of the carrier Vengeance, hidden behind Tau Ceti 4 with the rest of the Prometheus fleet. He watched the battle unfold on his screens, waiting for the signal. Dr. Linda Park stood beside him, her fingers wrapped tightly around a handrail. "They're almost in position," she said quietly. "I know. Once we fire the Helios missiles, there's no going back. We've never tested them at this scale. The entire star could destabilize." Jack turned to look at her. "Will it work?" Linda was silent for a moment. Then she nodded. "It will work. I just wanted you to understand what we're about to do." "I understand." Jack looked back at his displays. "We're about to save the human race." On the battlefield, Grace Holloway saw the Veilthrin fleet reach the designated coordinates. They were now positioned directly between Tau Ceti and its 4th planet, exactly where she needed them to be. "All ships break off and retreat at maximum speed," she ordered. "Execute emergency acceleration." The human fleet turned and ran, their engines burning at full power. The Vielthrin, sensing victory, surged forward in pursuit. They had no idea they were running into a trap. Grace opened a secure channel. "Commander Reeves, you are cleared to engage." Jack took a deep breath and gave the order. "Launch Helios missiles." The Prometheus fleet emerged from behind the planet like a ghost armada. 300 ships, fresh and undamaged, appeared on Velthrin sensors for the first time. Before the aliens could react, dozens of missiles streaked toward Tau Ceti itself. Zorath Ka stared at the new contacts in confusion. "Where did those ships come from? What are they doing?" Then the missiles hit the star. The effect was beyond anything the Velthrin had ever witnessed. Tau Ceti's corona erupted in a massive solar flare, a wave of radiation and superheated plasma that expanded outward at incredible speed. The entire system lit up like a second sun had been born. Human ships, equipped with specialized shielding designed for exactly this scenario, weathered the storm. Their hulls glowed red from the heat, but they survived. Velthrin ships were not so fortunate. Their shields were designed to deflect plasma weapons and kinetic rounds, not the raw fury of a star. The radiation wave swept through their fleet, overloading systems, cooking electronics, killing crews. Ships that had seemed invincible moments before began to drift, their power failing, their weapons going dark. In 90 seconds, 143 Velthrin warships were destroyed or disabled. Zorath Ka watched in horror as his fleet disintegrated around him. The Eternal Conquest survived only because its massive size allowed for deeper emergency bunkers, but even his flagship was badly damaged. Half his crew was dead from radiation exposure. "Impossible," he whispered. "This is impossible." Jack Reeves led the counterattack. The Prometheus fleet descended on the survivors like wolves on wounded prey, finishing what the star had started. Human ships that had been retreating moments before turned back to join the assault. Captain Diego Vance, his repaired destroyer Horizon leading a squadron of light cruisers, targeted a damaged Velthrin battleship. All weapons, fire at will. The battleship tried to return fire, but its systems were failing. Human rounds tore through its weakened hull, and it broke apart in a spectacular explosion. Admiral Holloway coordinated the attack from the Defiant, directing ships to focus on the largest remaining threats. "Don't let any of them escape. They need to know what happens when they threaten humanity." The battle became a slaughter. Velthrin ships tried to flee, but their damaged engines couldn't outrun the human pursuers. One by one, they were hunted down and destroyed. Zorath Ka ordered his flagship to retreat. The Eternal Conquest's engines were barely functional, but they had enough power to reach the hyperspace jump point. As his ship limped away from the carnage, he looked back at the battlefield. Of the 200 ships he had brought to this system, only 47 survived. Grace Holloway's voice echoed across all frequencies, transmitted to every Velthrin vessel and every listening post in the sector. "Tell your masters what happened here. Tell them what it costs to threaten humanity. And tell them this: we are coming for you." On Earth, President Cole watched the battle reports come in with tears in his eyes. They had done it. Against impossible odds, they had done it. General Webb stood beside him, her expression a mixture of relief and determination. "The Velthrin main fleet is broken, sir. We've won the battle." "But not the war," Cole said quietly. "Zorath Ka is still alive. The Dominion still exists. This isn't over." "No, sir. But for the first time, we have the advantage." Cole nodded slowly. He thought about all the people who had died to make this moment possible. The soldiers, the sailors, the civilians who had fought and sacrificed everything. Their deaths would not be in vain. "Send the order to Admiral Holloway," he said. "Tell her to begin the counteroffensive. It's time to take this war to the enemy." For the first time in 1,000 years, the Velthrin Dominion knew what it felt like to be afraid. The months following the Battle of Tau Ceti changed everything. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Valthrin Dominion was on the defensive. Human fleets pushed into enemy space, striking military installations and supply depots with ruthless efficiency. They didn't seek to conquer alien worlds. Humanity had no interest in building an empire. They sought to cripple, to punish, to demonstrate that aggression against their species would never go unanswered. Admiral Grace Holloway led the main offensive, her fleet growing stronger with each passing week as new ships joined from the Sol shipyards. She was relentless, pushing her crews to their limits, never giving the enemy time to recover or regroup. But victory was not assured. The Dominion was vast, with resources that dwarfed anything humanity possessed. And High Prelate Zorath Ka was not finished. On the Dominion homeworld, Zorath Ka faced judgment before the Supreme Council. His failure at Tau Ceti had cost the Dominion more ships than any battle in recorded history. The other prelates wanted his head. "You promised a quick victory," Supreme Prelate Korth Na said, his ancient voice cold with fury. "You promised that these humans would kneel within days. Instead, you have brought shame upon our entire civilization." Zorath Ka stood straight, refusing to show weakness. "I underestimated the enemy. That was my mistake. But I can still salvage this situation." "How? Your fleet is destroyed. Your reputation is ruined. Why should we give you another chance?" "Because I know how to hurt them." Zorath Ka stepped forward, his eyes burning with desperate determination. "The humans fight to protect their homeworld, Earth. If we destroy Earth, we destroy their will to fight. Everything they've built, everything they care about, it all begins and ends with that single planet." The council members exchanged glances. It was a bold plan, a risky plan, but it might be their only chance to end this war before it spread further. "Very well," Korth Na said finally. "You have one more chance. Take what remains of the fleet and destroy Earth. Do not fail again." Zorath Ka gathered every loyal commander he could find, every ship that could still fly. It was not much, barely 100 vessels, but it would have to be enough. He set course for the Sol system, knowing that this would be his final battle one way or another. On Earth, warning sensors detected the incoming fleet 3 days before it arrived. President Cole convened an emergency meeting of the Defense Council. "They're coming here," Colonel Sam Torres reported, his face grim on the holographic display. "Our intelligence suggests it's a suicide run. Zorath Ka knows he's finished if he fails again. He's betting everything on one final attack." Cole turned to General Webb. "Can we stop them?" "The main fleet is still in Dominion space with Admiral Holloway. We have defensive platforms and about 60 ships available for home defense. It will be close." "Close isn't good enough. Call Holloway back." "Sir, if we pull the fleet back now, we lose the momentum we've built. The Dominion might recover." Cole was silent for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "Our people come first. Earth comes first. Send the recall order." Grace Holloway received the message and immediately turned her fleet around. But even at maximum speed, they were days away. Earth would have to hold on its own until help arrived. The Valthrin fleet entered the Sol system on a cold morning in February. They came fast and hard, driving straight for Earth without stopping to engage the outer defenses. Zorath Ka knew he didn't have the ships for a prolonged battle. His only chance was to reach the planet and destroy it before reinforcements could arrive. In orbit around Earth, Commander Jack Reeves took command of the defense. His carrier Vengeance led the home fleet against the invaders, trying to slow them down, trying to buy time. "All ships, form a defensive line between the enemy and Earth," he ordered. "Don't let anything through." The battle that followed was the most brutal of the war. Human ships threw themselves at the Valthrin fleet, knowing they were outnumbered, knowing many of them would not survive. But they fought anyway, because their homes, their families, their entire species depended on them. Captain Diego Vance pushed the horizon to its limits, leading charge after charge against the enemy formation. His ship was hit repeatedly, losing sections of hull, losing crew members, but he refused to retreat. "Captain, we've lost Engine 3, his helmsman reported. "Shields are failing." Diego looked at his tactical display. A Valthran cruiser was breaking through the defensive line, heading straight for Earth. If it reached the planet, millions would die. "Set intercept course," he said quietly. "All remaining power to engines." "Sir, if we do that, we won't be able to stop." I know." Diego stood up from his command chair and looked at his crew. They were exhausted, wounded, terrified, but not one of them suggested giving up. "It's been an honor serving with you." The horizon accelerated toward the enemy cruiser. Valthran weapons fire hammered the small destroyer, tearing holes in its hull, but Diego kept the ship on course. At the last moment, he triggered the reactor overload. The explosion lit up the sky. The horizon and the Valthran cruiser vanished together in a ball of nuclear fire. On the Eternal Conquest, Zorath-Ka felt the blast shake his ship even from a distance. Another human vessel destroyed, but at such cost. These creatures simply would not stop fighting. "High Prelate," his tactical officer reported. "Enemy reinforcements are arriving." Zorath-Ka looked at his sensors and felt his heart sink. Admiral Holloway's fleet had arrived, pouring out of hyperspace in overwhelming numbers. The human home fleet, battered but unbroken, rallied to join them. The trap had closed. Zorath-Ka knew it was over. His fleet was surrounded, outgunned, and exhausted. There would be no victory here. There would be no redemption. But he would not run. He would not beg. He was a high prelate of the Valthran Dominion, and he would die like one. "All ships," he broadcast to his fleet, "continue the attack. Make them pay for every ship. Make them remember us." The final battle lasted 12 hours. Human ships systematically destroyed the remaining Valthran vessels, showing no mercy, taking no prisoners. Zorath-Ka watched his fleet die around him, ship by ship, until only the Eternal Conquest remained. Admiral Holloway's voice came through the communication system. "High Prelate Zorath-Ka, your fleet is destroyed. Your invasion has failed. Surrender now, and you will be treated with dignity." Zorath-Ka laughed bitterly. "Dignity? You've taken everything from me. My fleet, my honor, my future. What dignity remains?" "The dignity of ending this without more death. Your war is over." For a long moment, Zorath-Ka said nothing. Then he reached for the self-destruct controls. He never touched them. The human ships opened fire simultaneously, concentrating everything they had on the massive flagship. The Eternal Conquest's shields held for almost 30 seconds, longer than any ship had ever lasted under such an assault. Then they collapsed, and the ancient vessel came apart in a spectacular explosion that was visible from Earth's surface. The war was over. In the weeks that followed, the Valthran Dominion sued for peace. The Supreme Council, facing rebellions from their subject species and economic collapse from the failed war, had no choice but to accept human terms. The treaty was signed on a space station in neutral territory. President Cole represented humanity, his hand steady as he wrote his name. The terms were harsh but fair. The Dominion would recognize human space as sovereign territory, pay reparations for the colonies they had destroyed, and release all conquered species from servitude. Admiral Grace Holloway retired to a small house on the Oregon coast, where she spent her remaining years writing her memoirs and teaching military history to young officers. The statue erected in her honor in Geneva bore a simple inscription: "She never blinked." Commander Jack Reeves took over as head of Earth's defense fleet, dedicating his life to ensuring humanity would never again be caught unprepared. Captain Diego Vance was buried in Arlington Cemetery, along with the thousands of other soldiers who had given their lives in the war. His name was added to the memorial wall, alongside a quote from his final transmission. "It's been an honor." And across the galaxy, a new understanding spread among the space-faring civilizations. Humanity was not to be threatened. Humanity was not to be pushed. Because when you backed humans into a corner, they didn't surrender. They burned everything you had until you learned to leave them alone. The stars, once cold and hostile, had become a little safer for the children of Earth. And in the dark places between the stars, where ancient species plotted and schemed, there was a new word for humanity. They called them the Burning Ones. And they learned to be afraid.